Example 8 is to learn some basic functions in Microsoft Excel. Many times the information we gather, whether through a download, an export, or manual entry, contains pieces of information. We take a look at our worksheets and we realize that we could add or subtract information in two of the cells to come up with an additional piece of information. Or we might want to combine information, and that's the opposite of what we did when we separated out information in the text to columns feature. Or we might want to include a link that takes us directly to the source of our piece of information. Lucky for us, Excel provides several basic functions or formulas that either help us with our math or make our worksheets more useful. Let's take a look at 4 of those functions: add, subtract, combine or join, and link. Now on the Fun with Excel Examples notebook, we have examples 8a, add, 8b, subtract, 8c, combine, 8d, link, and I have a bonus one for you, 8e, flash fill. Let's get started with add. I've given you the cheat sheet that's in green as well as the screen capture that shows you what we're going to be doing. And add is considered sum. Now something to keep in mind here, this is one of the things that is the most used feature in Excel, so it's also on our Home tab. You could get to it here, but we're going to take a look at 2 other places where I think it makes more sense. But first I wanted to show you what we're going to be working with. We only have 3 examples, but keep in mind you could have 300 or 3,000. We have a birth year and an age at death, so we have those 2 pieces of information together with lots of other information in this worksheet. We're just going to focus on those 2 columns here. What we could do is come up with a calculated death year if we have the birth year and the age at death. And what I always do is include calculated death year because we could be straddling a year backwards or forwards. So let's take a look at how we do it. Since Excel is a numbers crunching program, this is really where it shines. You have your pieces of information, birth year and age at death, and let's see how we calculate that death year. We can go to our formula bar and it allows us to insert a function. We click on that and you'll see the same screen capture I've shown you is right here. And because it's one of the more common ones that's used, it's up near the top. We could also tell Excel what we wanted to do, and it would give us choices. We're going to choose sum. And as you can see, it adds that first piece of information for us, and it's also doing a little thinking. Excel is saying, I think you might want the sum of cells A3 and B3, and that's in fact what we want, and we get the information or the answer right here. So our calculated death year, if we took the birth year of 1890 and the age at death of 22, is going to be 1912. We can do it this way. We could also tell Excel that we want to work this figure out ourselves, and we'd take this information and that's simply clicking on it as number 1, and number 2 is going to be this piece of information. It does the same thing, as you can see, but it's simply having a little bit more control of what you're doing and also helping you work through your formulas. So either way, that works, and we'd simply say OK. Now what you're going to notice here is when we're in cell C3, we have a formula. So if this information were to change, perhaps he was actually 23 at his age of death, that information is going to change for us because Excel is always adding A3 and B3. So if we change any of the information in here, it's going to change that information for us. I'm going to switch this back to 22 so that we work with this date. Now once we have this date here, Excel will do the math for us in 1 instance or in 3 instances. Because Excel has looked at our formula and anticipated that what we want to do in column C is the same thing we did in cell C3. So it gives us the sum of A4 and B4. and the sum of A5 and B5. Now this is always going to be the formula, so if you change this information out, Microsoft Excel is going to update that information for you. I oftentimes also include the value, and that is simply clicking on the formula result that you got, copying it, again we have our marching ants, and then pasting it as the value. Now if we paste this value over here, it gives us the number 1912, that year, as opposed to the formula. As I said, if we were to change this, Excel would make that change for us in column C because it has a formula. However, it won't be changing any of the information in column D because that was a value. So make a decision what you want to do. Oftentimes I save both the formula as well as the value. And I'm going to take this information out here now because I want you to work with that yourself. And that's addition. Now we can do the same thing with subtraction. Say we have a death year and an age at death. We could calculate the birth year, and yet again I've also included the value. So you can take a look at the green cheat sheet, and you can also take a look at the screen capture. But what we're doing here for our formula is we're going to look for the function that is subtraction, and that's actually IMSUB. It's going to return the difference of two complex numbers. So we're going to select that one. We could also have told Excel here, if we didn't know what that formula was, we could have told Excel that we wanted to subtract, and it would give us that as our choice. So yet again we have our search function, and the formula is in the cell because that's what we clicked on, and the numbers that we're going to subtract are going to be subtracting 23 from 1890. So our first number is going to be 1890. Our second number is going to be 23, and we end up with the difference of those numbers, or 1867, as our birth year, and we simply click OK. Now I'm sure that you know what we're going to be doing here, which is carrying that example through, and that gives us the calculated birth year for row 4 as well as row 5. And of course these are formulas again. The subtraction of B3 from A3, B4 from A4, and B5 from A5. If we wanted to click on this cell, copy it, and paste the value, we'd be pasting the value as opposed to a clean paste, and that gives us the year 1867. If we change the age at death to 30, that's going to change the calculated birth year. The formula can always be updated, the value can't. So that's something to keep in mind. And Excel is kind of concerned here that this cell is formatted as text or preceded by an apostrophe. And what you could do is tell it to convert it to a number, or you could ignore the error. Now we're going to take a look at what proved to be one of the more popular functions or examples, which was concatenate. And that's a fancy word that you're stringing together text from various cells or combining that information. And oftentimes this is something that we do when we have a list of names or contact information. In this example that I'm going to show you, we have a first name, a surname. What I'd like Excel to do in column C is have the surname first with a comma, a space, and the first name. And in column D, I'm going to ask Excel to combine the first name with the surname. So let's join the surname and the first name. And that's simply done, again, with the formula, and we look for concatenate. This brings up that function again, and our text is going to be the surname. So we can type in, or we could just click on it. And this is the little oddnick thing. What we need to do in text 2 is insert a comma and a space. And text 3 is going to be the first name. So we have B3 with a comma and a space, followed by A3. And you can see our result is Keo, Matthew. Let's go ahead and click on OK. And that's what we get. And as we've learned with our functions, if we grab this information and scroll down, Excel will anticipate and give us our formula in every single row. Now the next thing I want to do is concatenate again, but this time I want to use A3, or the first name, as my first piece of information. I want to use a space as my second piece of information, and my third piece of information is going to be the surname. So I have Matthew plus a space plus Keo. Click on OK, and I get that name concatenated or joined. Yet again, by grabbing that handle at the far right-hand corner, I can work through all of my names. So that's an easy way to join information in two cells. Now keep in mind that these were right next to each other and I was just working with two pieces of information, but this could be any information that's on your worksheet as long as you're putting the cell information together. So that's how we concatenate. Now let's take a look at using links. In this example, I showed you that you can either use the function of hyperlink to include a link, or you can add your link manually. And I'm showing you that in this cell, I've added the information manually, and Excel has been clever enough to know that this is an actual link. In this instance, I used the function of hyperlink, and then I worked through that function to include the link as well as what I wanted to call that piece of information. So let's see how that's done. I'm going to remove this information so we can work through it. So in this instance, I'm adding an address. And when I do that, Excel knows that this is an address, and if I click once, I can follow that link, and if I click and hold, I can select that cell. So if I've added email address to a contact list or anything else I'm doing in Excel, those will all show up as links. I can go to that email address. Now in the instance of family search, we're going to go ahead and use the function. I also wanted to show you, this is, I think, the easiest way to go to insert function, but you can also go to the tab at this ribbon, which is formulas, and you can insert a function here. And what you'll notice is in this function library, there are many different functions you can use. And as you get more comfortable with Excel, you might want to try playing with some of those. So if we were to use the insert function, either here or here, and this time we'll try this one. We choose hyperlink and say OK. Our link location is going to be http://familysearch.org, which is the website, but you could also have grabbed it from that site. The friendly name is going to be Family Search. And I click on OK. And this simply creates a shortcut. If I have my workbook open and this worksheet open, I can easily go to Family Search. So let's go ahead and click on this and see if it takes us there. And sure enough, we're at the familysearch.org website. Now, this works great if you have links to particular places that you want to go or websites that you want to go. So this is just something to keep in mind, that you have your links right here. And that's how you use hyperlink, either by filling in the information yourself or by using hyperlink in the insert function. Now let's go ahead and play with something that I found out about after Roots Tech, and I thought I would share it with you because it does the same thing or similar thing that Concatenate does, but it does it without a function. So let's go ahead and take a look at some information that I copied and pasted into this worksheet so that we could work with information, and it comes from something we worked with earlier, which was the Scottish census for the Keos. I have 28 pieces of information, and we're going to go ahead and simply play with this. I've shown you the basic functions or formulas for flash fill, and the steps that you'll need to play with in order to do it. What we're going to do is we're going to insert a column after column C. So we simply go to column D, and we could insert cells, rows, or columns from this Home tab, or we can right-click and insert. And it knows that we want to insert a column here. So I'm going to make this a little wider just to start with. And of course that was by grabbing that column and just moving it either to the left or to the right, however wide you want it. So this is our column D. And what I'm going to do is type in Flash Fill as the column heading here. In this instance, perhaps I've decided that instead of concatenating Peter Keogh, I simply want P. Keogh. I enter the information, I click on that cell, and in Data, so we're moving away from Home again, the next door neighbor to Text to Columns is Flash Fill. I'm going to click on Flash Fill and let's see what happens. It's magic. Excel knew that what I wanted to do was take the first initial from the first name, combine it with the last name, and it even gave it a space, I believe, because that's what I typed in for every single cell. Now, there's a little box here that says I have flash fill options, and I could undo the flash fill if this wasn't what I wanted. I could accept the suggestions, and I could select all 27 changed cells. So those are the choices that I have. Now if I go back to P. Keogh and decide perhaps I want the title, the first initial in the name, let's see what happens. I type in Mr. P. Keogh and enter, and it makes that change for me in all of those cells. So it works through that column. The thing to keep in mind also is the columns do not need to be consecutive. They didn't need to be next to each other. I could have come back up here to Mr. P. Keogh, and perhaps I decide that what I want to do is add the parish, and that's in column H. I could simply choose Paisley and enter, and it adds that column of information. Now this is a great system because although I've only shown you a worksheet that has columns A through I, keep in mind that you could take something from column A, something from column G, something from column Z if you wanted to, and use Flash Fill. So this is a great feature in Microsoft Excel that I wasn't aware of. I found out about it after RootsTech and thought I'd show it to you because it might be a little bit easier than working with Concatenate for some of you. And also keep in mind that the information you're getting is not a formula. This information can be changed at any time, but it's the value that you asked for. So that's Flash Fill, and that was our bonus example to go with the examples on learning basic functions or formulas.